270 months. That was the sentence handed down by Judge Cahill in the case of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. So what were the arguments for the state? What were the arguments for the defense? Why 270 months? And what happens next? What is the appeal process going to look like? Well, you're going to get answers to all of those questions in today's episode. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we are looking at the formal sentencing of Derek Chauvin. We're going to look at what he was convicted of. We're going to look at how he was sentenced. We're going to look at those traditional sentencing guidelines and then how the aggravating factors played into a higher sentence for Derek Chauvin. We're going to look at the judge's ruling on several of the defense motions for a new trial and otherwise. And then we're going to look at the probable issues that will come up on appeal. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share me on social media. And also, all of our Lawyer Up episodes are available on the major podcast formats. So first things first, let's do a quick recap. We got the 270 months. That's 22 and a half years. That is the prison sentence for Derek Chauvin, who was convicted by a jury back in April of 2021 of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter after pressing his knee against the neck of George Floyd for about 9.5 minutes, during which time Floyd said he couldn't breathe, went motionless, and then ultimately passed away. Floyd's death was captured on widely seen bystander video, which set off demonstrations around the United States and worldwide. Now, even though Chauvin was found guilty of all three counts, it was one act, so the judge only pronounced a sentence for the most serious offense, and that was the second-degree murder, leaving the lesser included offenses unadjudicated. Now, the range of punishment for that offense was up to 40 years in prison. But of course, Minnesota has sentencing guidelines which direct judges on appropriate sentences. Now, under the Minnesota sentencing guidelines, a defendant who is guilty of second-degree murder with no criminal record like Chauvin faced a presumptive sentence of 12 and a half years. But prosecutors asked for what is called an upward departure due to several aggravating factors that could warrant a sentence higher than the guidelines. Now, the aggravating factors that were found by Judge Cahill included finding that Chauvin, number one, treated Floyd with particular cruelty, number two, abused his position of trust and authority as a police officer, number three, committed his crime as a part of a group of three or more. And number four, the crime was committed in the presence of children. Now, any one of those four factors could warrant a higher sentence if the judge also found substantial and compelling reasons for a sentence above the guideline range. Ultimately, while Judge Cahill found four independent aggravating factors, he only found that two of the four came with substantial and compelling reasons for an upward departure. And those were, number one, that Chauvin treated Floyd with particular cruelty, and number two, that he abused his position of trust and authority as a police officer. In Judge Cahill's 22-page judgment, he detailed specific evidence from the trial to support his conclusion that there were substantial and compelling reasons for an upward departure in regards to those two aggravating factors. Then he went into a very detailed analysis of how similarly situated defendants had been sentenced over the last 10 years in Minnesota in arriving at 270 months as the appropriate sentence. And as I had mentioned in my last video, in advance of the sentencing date, both parties, the state and the defense, had filed written sentencing memorandums detailing in writing their arguments about an appropriate sentence. Now, oral arguments for both sides echoed the arguments that they had made in their memorandums. The prosecution, of course, was seeking a 30-year sentence for the former police officer, and the defense was asking that Chauvin just be sentenced to probation and time already served. The prosecutor said Chauvin's actions were egregious and that a sentence of 30 years would properly account for the profound impact of the defendant's conduct on the victim's family, and the community. Now, defense attorney Eric Nelson cited Chauvin's lack of any criminal record and argued that Chauvin was unaware that he was even committing a crime. He wrote that, in his mind, he was simply performing his lawful duty in assisting the other officers in the arrest of George Floyd. Obviously, ultimately, the judge did not find those arguments persuasive. Now, the defense did file a few other motions that have been ruled upon. Defense attorney Nelson filed a motion for new trial for Chauvin. Now, this is fairly routine, and it's often requested after a conviction. He argued that there was extensive pretrial publicity that tainted the jury pool and denied Chauvin his right to a fair trial. He also argued that the court erred when it declined the defense's request to move the trial out of Minnesota and to sequester the jury. Cahill denied those motions, but you can guarantee we will see them brought up again on appeal. The defense was also asking for a hearing to investigate whether there was juror misconduct based upon an alternate juror who made public comments that she felt pressured to render a guilty verdict, and another juror who was not candid during jury selection about participating in a Martin Luther King Jr. demonstration. Again, these motions were denied, but most likely will be argued on appeal. Also, in my last video, I had asked you guys to put in your sentence predictions. Put those in the comments, and you did that. They were all over the map. Now, recall, I had predicted 28 years due to those 4 aggravating factors. However, since Judge Cahill didn't find all 4 of them to be substantial and compelling, he didn't go that high. Several of you guys had guessed 20 years and several more 25 years, and those were both closer than my guess. So good job, guys. So what does this all mean for Derek Chauvin? Well, in Minnesota, with good behavior, he will serve 2/3 of the penalty, or about 15 years in prison, while the rest will be on supervised release, or what you and I call parole. But recall that Chauvin also has been indicted on federal charges alleging that he violated Floyd's civil rights. So that issue is still pending, and he could get additional time in that case. And the 3 other officers that were involved in Floyd's death still have both state and federal charges to deal with. So that's where things stand after sentencing. Now, attorneys for Chauvin have stated that he will appeal the case. So I will keep you posted on all of the issues that are raised on appeal. But note that an appeal does not stay or stop the sentence. So Chauvin will be serving his time as the case makes its way through the appellate courts. So that's the episode. I hope that you have enjoyed it and gained information from it. If you did, do me a favor and hit that like button. If you got something to say, was the sentence too high, too low? Give me a comment in the comment section. If you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel. We cover all kinds of fantastic and interesting legal topics. And last but not least, you guys know it, I love it when you share me on social media. Again, my name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.